And for more, let's go now to Lancaster in northern England. Renaud Foucart is a senior lecturer in economics at Lancaster University's School of Management. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Good evening.
So here we have it. It's pretty much going to script at this point. The French Prime Minister, who did succeed in one respect, in that ever since he made that shock announcement last month of this special session of Parliament and a vote of confidence that he's perhaps sure to lose, it has forced a conversation on the budget. Is it the right conversation to be having, France's ballooning deficit?
I think Bayrou is definitely someone who has a sense of dramatization. And so I think, to be clear, contrary to what Bayrou has said at some point, the IMF is not going to come to France tomorrow. But it is true that France has a deficit problem, and that this is a bit like the proverbial boiling frog. Like France, at the moment, they have 6% GDP deficit roughly, but they still pay interest rates that are based on the past, so the time when we had low interest, and also the debt over GDP didn't explode like crazy, also because it was eaten by inflation. So as of today, France is in a bad position. It's not terrible. The problem is what comes next. If France does not reduce deficits, every single new billion of debt issued by France will be issued at a price that is higher. So the interest rate that France will pay on the next generation of debt to be rolled out is going to be more and more important. And so where Bayrou, I think, made the right to go
Renaud Foucart, I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
We're going to cross over to the National Assembly and listen to the French Prime Minister.
Comme je me suis efforcé à la tribune de ne pas prendre à partie les uns ni les autres. Parce que
the messages that we are receiving constantly, these are messages from people who are sending through some quite violent comments, but that is the life of a politician. So if today, through our own behavior, try and move beyond this image that people have, one of violence and mistrust, then we would be doing service to the democracy that we are here to defend. That is my first comment. My second comment, if you would allow me to, I forgot to mention members of the government who are here, but each and every one of them have spent 9 months with me. And for me as Prime Minister, I spent 9 months of quite immense joy working by your sides, because despite all prognostics, we formed a team with some heavyweights amongst our ranks. We worked together with solidarity, with friendship, and there was not a single crisis. There was not a single moment of tension in the past 9 months together. And when you look at the diversity of political sensitivities that were part of the government, it was no easy task, but we managed to work together. I believe that we showed a Republican front with honor and with drive. So therefore, on behalf of the government, I would like to thank the Assemblée Nationale, and as Prime Minister, I would like to thank the members of the government. That was my second comment. Thirdly, there were no questions asked today. Is the country's current situation one that calls for further division, further procrastination, or is the current situation one where we need to take stock of the situation and fully recognize what that situation is? the true future of our country will come through in the coming weeks, not today. Because things are not turning right and not panning out as people would expect, but we need to have a clear mind. And the politicians, all of us, need to have a true understanding of what we are doing to act unitedly. And I would sincerely hope that we can defend a vision that a country cannot give up its independence, be it from a military or a financial point of view. We cannot stand by as we are subject to dominant powers, as we are subject to our debt holders. We have to stand here, and we have to defend our vision as we have done for the past 9 months. This is a moment of truth, and this moment of truth, a vote, will not efface that from the reality that we are currently living in. I am very happy that we have been able to spend this time together to talk about the fact that this is a moment of truth.
C'était un moment de vérité. Ce moment de vérité ne s'effacera pas. Un vote n'efface pas la réalité. Et c'est ce que nous avons ensemble tenté de reconstruire. C'est très important pour l'avenir. Et je suis heureux que nous ayons pu partager ce moment. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Mes chers collègues, le Premier ministre ayant engagé la responsabilité du gouvernement, je vais mettre aux voix l'approbation de sa déclaration de politique générale. Le vote se déroulera dans les salles voisines de la salle de séance. Les bulletins de vote ont été placés dans vos pupitres. Le scrutin est annoncé dans l'enceinte de l'Assemblée nationale. Il est ouvert pour une durée de 30 minutes. Il sera donc clos à 18h50. La séance est suspendue.
Speaker of Parliament there announcing that after all the speeches have concluded, Parliament will now vote the confidence or not. It's a straight up and down vote for François Bayrou's government. You heard François Bayrou there speaking for the second time to lawmakers, this time from the floor of the National Assembly, in what sounded more than his earlier speech from the rostrum as a goodbye speech, thanking members of his government, calling it a moment of truth. The result of the vote, of this vote of confidence, whereas again they just need a simple majority for one side or the other, will come in exactly 30 minutes' time. We are in the company of Renaud Foucart, Senior Lecturer in Economics at Lancaster University, and we heard the Prime Minister. Yeah, your reaction to that pitch he made about this being a moment of truth kind of harks back to what you were saying earlier about being frogs in a pot of warming water, the way he described the budget predicament of France.
Yeah, and I think also he said something that is quite important, which is transparency and being a moment where people can finally have a conversation. If there is one thing I see that Bayrou brought to the table that nobody did before him, is the big elephant in the room, which is intergenerational fairness in France. The fact that there's been a bit more transparency on the budget, and we understand now how big the pension problem is in France. The fact that, for instance, the education budget, a part of it is stolen directly to pay for the pension of the general civil service. The fact that it's actually the big welfare spending in France, and that there will be no discussion about the future sustainability of France without talking, as in the terms of Bayrou, the fact that we have sacrificed to a certain extent current comfort on the comfort of boomers. And this is something that nobody told before him, and something that he was able to say, I think, because it's a farewell tour and he's not expecting to stay in post. And I guess his chances of comeback are relatively low. But this is the moment France is right now, and I think people cannot ignore this anymore.
Yeah, he was in an interview with broadcaster TF1 in their flagship 8 o'clock news program, where he talked about sacrificing future generations, quote, for the comfort of boomers. And from the left and the right, they came down on him like a ton of bricks. question is, this idea of, for instance, one of the ideas that was floated was to, for instance, no longer index pensions on inflation as much as before. Is that fair?
Yes, so it is clearly fair in the sense that the current generation of people who are retired, they didn't pay as much as they get. So some people would say they respected the rules, but they also wrote the rules themselves. And the rules were also written based on a different demographic reality. So by choosing not to have as many children as their parents, Boomer also somehow chose that the models would not be sustainable with the current replacement rate. And if you compare to countries like the UK where I live, you don't have a low state pension in France. You have people who receive state welfare benefits from the state that would be 3,000, 4,000 euro a month. We're talking sometimes about people who own their house, who may own a second house, and who still receive 4,000 euro a month from the state. This is simply clearly unfair. And I think it's quite crazy. We had a lot of conversation about intergenerational fairness in the context of the environment, where I think people sort of got the message that there was a problem. But when it's about pension in France, it's not only that you have elderly people voting more, which is the truth, but you also have young people in the street to defend. At the same time, if you defend those very high pensions, you are also saying we are cutting spending in education. We are cutting all other possible sources of investment simply because we want to sustain those promises made by a generation to themselves, and that will never apply to the future. So when people are fighting for the current pensions in France, when people who are 25, 30-year-old, this will never apply to them. The demography is not the same, and their pension anyway will be somehow linked to capital markets and not only to the next generation.
That conversation about the boomers who took power and never relinquished it, is it something you think will continue in the next election cycle in France?
At some point, I think that there was a problem with the way the French constitution works, which is that Emmanuel Macron, and you know Emmanuel Macron being Jupiter above all the parties, etc., he took on himself to nominate prime minister, and that's kind of his role, but he never had like those public discussion about building coalitions with others. So I remember, you will remember that after the last election, the last snap election, there was actually one clear message from the electorate, is that they voted for a Republican front. They voted for the left and the center in second rounds against the far right. So if there was one message in this fragmented parliament, it was, we want the others, those who are not the far right, to take the responsibility. At this point, there could have been a conversation about how can we agree to build a better future and bring back deficit to a lower level. This didn't happen because of the left, because of the center, because of a lot of different things. But this didn't happen, and this must happen in the future.
The conversation you're saying must happen. At this point in time, we heard in that speech from François Bayrou, you talked about intergenerational fairness. There's a question about income inequality. And we heard in his speech at one point, he bristled against those who'd like to put more taxes on the wealthy. He even gave a shout out to France's richest man, the luxury goods mogul Bernard Arnault. Is that the right approach?
Definitely not. And it might be why Bayrou failed. Bayrou took the job because he was the guy willing to talk to the far right and to the left at the same point, which is, I think, a key element if you're a centrist. But the problem is what the left are asking for. I think people who are like, okay, economists like me, we tell you they're asking for those very high tax on capital. And it's true, it's not going to bring a lot of revenue. So somehow the left, okay, Bayrou is right, they are lying, it's not going to bring a lot of money. But at the same time, you cannot ignore the fact that in France, you have demand for that. People think in itself, from a purely fairness point of view, they want those tax rates to be higher. And so even if it doesn't bring revenue, you have to have this conversation because this is democracy. People want that. And so you need to tell to the left and the far left, guys, you cannot build a budget on the premises that it will bring half of the deficit. Many countries have tried that. It doesn't work. Capital move. Those people will put their money elsewhere. But at the same time, you need to tell to people like Bayrou or Macron, people want at least symbolic moves for fairness. And Macron, if you remember, one of his first moves was to remove the tax on the highest capital, so the impôt sur la fortune in France. So this is the kind of thing that I think somehow, if you want to build a coalition between the center and the left, must return in some form, some symbol to say we don't just spit on the face of people who want to tax the wealthiest more.
Yeah, Renaud Foucart, you touch on something essential, which is coalition building. Today they're having elections in Norway. The incumbent Labour Prime Minister is probably said, according to the polls, to have to make a coalition with 4 other parties. And that's just normal. And that's normal everywhere. It's normal in places like neighboring Belgium, where sometimes they wait nearly 600 days to form a government. But are the French going to learn from this experience and be a little bit more like the rest of Europe?
They should, because that's what they asked for in the elections. So first of all, there were a lot of debates before the previous snap election about, oh, the current majority system in France doesn't work. We want proportional representation. Marine Le Pen was asking for that. François Bayrou was asking for that. The left was asking for that. And what they got at the last election is a parliament that looks like a German parliament. 1/3 bloc on the left, 1/3 bloc on the center right, and 1/3 on the far right. What everybody must learn to do at this time is not to have red lines on everything. 1 year later, they're still not able to do that. And this is, I blame all the political parties. I think I can hear some positive sound from the Social Democrats. So 4 was saying, okay, if we are prime minister, we're willing to make an effort. I think somehow some on Les Républicains, so Retailleau, because he wants to keep his job, is willing to make some move. But you also heard Laurent Wauquiez, so that the parliamentary Les Républicains was saying, we don't want new tax on people who work, and also not on people who have worked in the past. So we cannot touch the pension, we cannot touch taxation. So those are the talks of people who don't want to get in coalition. So the quest for France right now is identify the adults in the room. Who are the people happy to sit down and make serious sacrifice to get a coalition and to make the country work?
Renaud Foucart, many thanks for joining us from Lancaster in England.
Thank you so much.